Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Space News, the weekly show where we dive into the launches that occurred last week, launches slated to occur next week, Starship news, and other interesting space news. The main event this week being finally the flight of Starship SN10. Today is Saturday, February 20th, and there is a lot to talk about. So let's get started. Let's head straight into SN10 news. SpaceX was attempting a flight on Monday the 1st, but the first attempt got delayed to Wednesday the 3rd. On Wednesday, ground crews did their final preparations for launch. At about 1:30 in the afternoon local, we saw some ground clouds by the tank farm, suggesting SpaceX was proceeding with the start of fuel-up. A little while later, we saw some venting at the base of Starship, suggesting they were beginning to actually load fuel into the vehicle. Finally, we saw the triple vent, which is the last major milestone until ignition. At about 4 minutes prior to T0, SpaceX went live on their YouTube channel. At T-minus 2 seconds, the 3 Raptor engines ignited. However, at T-minus 0.1 seconds, the engine shut down and an abort was announced. This abort was due to a single Raptor engine's thrust reading off nominal. The SpaceX team then decided to try and go for another attempt in about 2 hours. When the time came, we saw the same events as before, with SpaceX again going live at T-minus 4 minutes. This time, however, at T0, the 3 Raptor engines ignited and the vehicle came to life, crawling off the pad.
SC2, please prepare for section 35. OSC, SC1, LVN.
We saw the scheduled shutdown of the first engine and the second. And at around 4 minutes and 20 seconds, we saw the shutdown of the final engine as Starship commenced its signature belly flop maneuver. Those flippity-flappity things controlled the vehicle during its horizontal flight as it targeted the landing pad. Now, all of these events have happened successfully the 2 other times up to this point. However, as the vehicle approaches the landing pad, the engine relight, vehicle reorientation, and landing have never been totally successful before. When it came time for this portion, well, just watch. When it came time, not the usual 2, but 3 Raptor engines ignited to flip the vehicle back into vertical flight. The landing gear did deploy, and Starship touched down for the first time in history. All was good until a few minutes later when, well, that happened. Despite the explosion, the flight was a huge success, being the first Starship to ever land. The explosion was due to a few things. First off, the current temporary landing legs on Starship really suck. Second, 3 of the 6 crappy landing legs worked. And third, Starship touched down at about 15 miles per hour, which is definitely faster than it should have. Alright, now let's go just down the road from all this action to the build site and look at Brendan's diagram for the week. Make sure you're following Brendan at Brendan_Lewis on Twitter. You can see that SN10 is now all grayed out. SN11, however, is complete and currently scheduled to roll out to the pad as early as Monday. The next big version of Starship, SN15, has all of its parts and is waiting to be stacked in the high bay. You can see SN16, 17, 18, and 19. And finally, Super Heavy Booster number 1 is being stacked in the high bay. Let's hope we see SN11 move out to the pad ASAP, and maybe even a cryo-proof test by the end of the week. Now over to the launches we saw last week. First up, a Russian Soyuz 2.1B rocket launched the first Arctico M1 satellite for the Russian government from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan on February 28th at 7 o'clock UTC. The Arctica M satellites are designed to provide meteorological observations and emergency communications over Earth's polar regions. Also on February 28th, India's Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, or PSLV, launched the Amazonia 1 Earth Observation Satellite for Brazil from the Satish Dhawan Space Center on February 28th at 4:53 UTC. The spacecraft carries an optical camera to monitor environmental conditions such as deforestation in the Amazon region. Finally, on March 4th, a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket launched 60 Starlink satellites from Launch Complex 39A, or LC-39A, at Kennedy Space Center at 8:24 UTC. This booster flew for a record 8th time, and following stage separation, it landed on the Of Course I Still Love You drone ship, to be flown for a record 9th time. Now on to the launches we hope to see over the next 7 days. First off, we expect to see another Starlink mission, Starlink 21, which will launch from Slick 40 from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida at approximately 9:55 p.m. Eastern Time. Next, we should see a Chinese Long March 7A rocket launch a classified satellite known as XJY-6. The launch will mark the second flight of the Long March 7A rocket. In addition, the XJY-6 payload is the second satellite to carry that name, after the first XJY-6 payload was launched on a Long March 7A launch failure in March of 2020. Unfortunately, these are the only launches over the next week. In other very exciting news, Rocket Lab announced its plans to create a new rocket, the Neutron, that will be a direct competitor with SpaceX's Falcon 9 with a similar reusable first stage. Now, Neutron is much bigger than their current rocket, the Electron. However, Neutron is about the same size as Northrop Grumman's Antares rocket and much smaller than SpaceX's Falcon 9. In addition, Rocket Lab announced that they plan to launch Neutron from Wallops Island, Virginia, from a pad that already exists there. The interesting thing about this is that there are only 2 pads that exist there. One, which is already owned by Rocket Lab, is only made for Electron. This must mean that they are planning to take over Northrop Grumman's Antares launch pad, suggesting that they may take over Northrop Grumman's contracts with NASA and the government. This is all a conspiracy for now, though. And that does it. Thank you all so much for watching. It means so much to me, and I really do thank you. If you enjoyed, I ask you to subscribe and hit the bell notification to get notified as soon as these videos are published to ensure that the news is as up to date as possible. Thank you again so much, and goodbye!